And you want people to feel good after their workout. And, maybe they might have a little bit of muscle soreness the next day or two, but as long as that is not, severe muscle soreness, that's another thing that maybe they did too much too soon. If they can't even get out of bed or walk up a flight of steps or something, they have extreme muscle soreness, it's probably a sign that.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Gym Owners Podcast with Anthony
and Natalia.
Today we have Dr. Jess from Fitness Law Academy, president and founder, back on to go over some more case study and help educate us all about the law and making sure we're all doing our part to stay safe and our businesses are protected. How's it going, Dr. Jess?
It's going great. Thanks a lot for having me back. I'm glad to be here today. Thanks so much.
Got it. It's one of our most fun podcasts that we had. And that's the one I know where I've learned so much and it was favorite in the company. So yeah. I think we should go and start kicking it off with a question to help educate us why do you think gym owners should do everything they can to avoid a negligence lawsuit?
Yeah, I think, when a negligence lawsuit is filed, first of all, somebody's been injured, okay? They have a lawyer. The lawyer files what's called a complaint with the court, and that initiates the lawsuit. And then after that, sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5 years before that case either goes to trial or is settled out of court. So it's a very long period of time, okay, first of all. So it's very time consuming over those several years and a very stressful time as well. So what happens once the complaint is filed, shortly thereafter, there's what's called the discovery phase. And this is where all the evidence is collected, okay? So, for example, the plaintiff's lawyer might want the defendant, the gym owner or manager, to provide a lot of documents. So they might ask the court for the lawyer of the defendant to ask the defendant for these documents. They can be the waiver, release of liability. It could be a membership contract. It could be equipment maintenance records, injury reports. It could be all kinds of different documents that they're seeking, depending on, the injury and what happened and that kind of thing. So you might have to produce a lot of documents as the gym owner or manager. In one case, the defendants had to produce 750 pages of documents. So you can think about the time and the stress that can create. The other thing that happens in the discovery phase is the testimony that you have to provide under oath. So you're going to get questions from the plaintiff's lawyers, and you have to answer them under oath. And that can also be very stressful, okay? And you just don't want to put yourself in that situation. And so, from a time perspective, from a stress perspective, it takes a long time usually for these cases to finalize. And so it becomes a very, what I would think of as a very stressful period because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. Are you going to be liable or are you not going to be liable, in a negligence lawsuit? And the other thing is, if the media covers the injury and sometimes like a wrongful death case or a serious injury case, the media will cover the case. And, that can end up, having a negative effect on the club or the gym's reputation and future business, really. And so you don't want that to happen either. So I think for a lot of reasons, from a time perspective and a stress perspective, you want to do everything you can to ever being named as a defendant, in a negligence lawsuit. And then also all the time that, you're spending with your lawyer that's defending you and going over a lot of the issues and everything with the case. So it's very time consuming. I would guess that most gym owners and managers would prefer to use their time differently. spend time helping their clients and their members become healthy and fit would be much more fun, enjoyable than dealing with, the lawsuit and then worrying about it for so long, for a long period of time. So I think that's, a major, reason or reasons, why you would want to try to avoid being named as a defendant in a negligence lawsuit.
Sure. Also, if you were thinking about selling the club, that's forget about that, because now it has to be disclosed, or that's its own source of trouble. So to best defense, to make sure you're not in a negligence lawsuit, like what are some things that everybody should be crossing their T's and dotting their I's with?
Yeah, well, I think your best defense, okay, and a lot of times, gym owners and managers might think, well, the only thing that would be a defense for them would be their waiver or their, liability, release of liability. And remember, that defense is only effective for you after the negligence lawsuit has been filed. Waivers or releases of liability do nothing to enhance safety, okay, nothing whatsoever. So, when we talk about, preventing injuries, okay, in a gym or health club, we need to think about, definitely the safety of our environment, the safety, that our trainers and instructors are really thinking about safety all the time, of course, but also not to be breaching any duties. So in a negligence lawsuit, the plaintiff has to prove 4 elements in a negligence lawsuit. So they have the burden of proof, the injured party that's filing the lawsuit. So the very first thing they have to show is that there was some kind of duty, okay? Some kind of duty that the defendant, the instructor, the management, whoever the defendant might be, had some duty that was owed to that plaintiff, okay? And so we have, in fitness facilities, we have a lot of duties. And I think one of the concerns is that people in our field, fitness managers and instructors and so on, might not realize what all of those potential duties might be, okay? And that's where the education comes in and reviewing case law so you can get a better understanding of how courts determine duty and how the plaintiffs have to prove that duty. So first you have to establish a duty, okay? And then the plaintiff has to show that there's some kind of breach of duty. So the defendant didn't carry out that duty properly. They breached that duty, and then the breach of duty was the cause of the harm or the injury. So those are the 4 elements: duty, breach of duty, causation, and then harm or injury. And then, of course, what the plaintiff in a negligence lawsuit, which comes under civil law, the plaintiff is seeking monetary damages. Okay, so you hear about these cases, a lot of times can be in the millions of dollars. There was a personal trainer case, $14.5 million. There was not too long ago a jogging class at a university where the student suffered a very severe heat injury, and that was settled for $39.5 million.
Can you go over that case real quick of like what happened? Do you know the particulars about that?
Just real quick. Generally, it was a jogging class, and the instructor had the students run a 5K around campus, and it was extremely hot. And not think about, the potential heat injury. And then a lot of things, the first aid wasn't there. The emergency procedures weren't in place. There were a lot of things that went wrong in that case. And then what was kind of interesting after that case occurred, this was in California. They brought in Doug Casa from the Corey Springer Institute. He's done a lot of work with heat injury prevention, and they came up with a lot of standards and guidelines for all of the universities to follow to help prevent anything like that from happening again in their, jogging or other classes, that the university provides. So anyway, it's what I call kind of a reactive, aspect. If they would have been proactive and this instructor had been well trained and educated, maybe this heat injury wouldn't have occurred if that instructor had been, had the proper knowledge and skills and, was instructing the students in a safe and effective way. And then there's been other cases, there was just some recently, 11 million, another one was 13 million. I mean, it seems to me as I reviewed these cases over the last few decades that we're starting to see more and more of these cases in the millions of dollars. And so anyway, those are the, the damages that, the plaintiffs are seeking. And of course, the jury makes a decision and like I said, I think last time, most of these negligence cases are settled out of court. About 95% of them are. And so sometimes we know what that settlement amount is, but a lot of times we don't because it's not disclosed. It's not public information. But anyway, it's just kind of a trend that I've seen over the years where, the damages seem to be getting higher and higher. And of course, gym owners and managers definitely want to make sure that their liability insurance, has enough, the coverage amounts are going to be adequate. And of course, they need to discuss those things with their lawyer and their insurance provider and so on. What kind of coverage and the amount of coverage they really need to have if they're ever liable, for the negligence.
That seems kind of excessive, though. I mean, me personally, I think like $40 million for heat stroke. But I mean, it must have been very intense, but you would think it would be worth it to spend the money versus settling at $40 million to be proactive, because all of these, even $14.5 million, I mean, those are excessive amounts in settlement, I think, for what the stroke, I understand, but a heat stroke injury outside in California. And California has pretty nice weather all year round. So I don't know. That's good.
On a particular day, it was pretty hot. So, and again, you have beginners and, novices and, if they're not used to the heat, acclimatized to the heat. I mean, you've got all kinds of, factors that are in play there. But this particular student had severe permanent damages and 24/7 care for the rest of her life. So from what I remember from the case, but, so anyway, kind of going back to these elements that the plaintiff has to prove: the duty, the breach of duty, causation, and the harm or injury. It's really important to understand that the breach of duty has to be the cause of the injury. And remember, I think last time we talked about all the different causes of injury, might be, all kinds of things that can, cause an injury. But in a negligence lawsuit, that plaintiff has to show that it was a breach of duty that caused the injury. So sometimes there are cases filed and the plaintiff has a hard time proving that it was the cause of the injury. And the injury might have been caused by something else. And so when we talk about, breach of duty and the importance of trainers and instructors, to have adequate knowledge and skills, in training and teaching their participants and clients, I think it's really important for people to understand that importance of practical skills, because the court might acknowledge the credentials of the trainer. They have a degree or certification or whatever it might be. But the court really doesn't care too much about the credentials. Okay. They might indicate it or mention it in their opinions. But what they're looking at is the action or the conduct of the professional. All right. So was the breach of duty is some kind of conduct or behavior? And that all is connected back to their level of skills that they have. So do they have the skill to design and deliver a proper exercise program given the individual's health and fitness status? Do they have that knowledge and skill to do that? And so I think when we think about certifications, and I know you just had a podcast, describing some of these certifications and so on. And, one of the things about accredited certifications and, most organizations now have their certifications accredited through the NCCA, the National Commission on Certifying Agencies. And of course, to have your certification exam accredited, you have to meet all the standards of the NCCA. Now, what's interesting, and I think it's important for gym managers and owners to know, is that none of those standards require that the individual has had to have any kind of formal education or practical training prior to sitting for that certification exam. So when you look at all these certifications for trainers and instructors, really the only requirements are they have to have a high school diploma, AED CPR certification, and be 18 years old. And then they're eligible to take the exam. And so that's one of I think, the concerns for managers and owners is not to assume that because somebody has an accredited certification. Now, if I was a manager owner, that would be a baseline for me. Everybody would need to have an accredited certification. But then when they come in and I'm going to interview them, I'm going to test their knowledge and skills and, try to assess their level of knowledge and skills the best I can. And then probably, I think, like I mentioned last time, would be to offer some, formal education and practical training and maybe have them work kind of like a student teacher or an intern for a while under one of my really competent professionals, and then assess their skills, before they start working with, with clients and with participants. I want to be sure, because I know one of my duties is to make sure that my instructors, are well prepared and well trained, to perform the job, so they are, properly designing a program for the individual. So,
you want to make sure they do your standards and procedures at your facility and things like that. I had a question. So, like, for example, if that trainer with the heat stroke thing, if he would have just brought bottles of water with electrolyte packets with him, just in case, like in preparedness, would that have absolved him, or would it still have gone the way it went?
Yeah, well, you never know. You can always think of all of these hypotheticals, like what if they would have done this? What if they would have done that? Kind of thing. Yeah. And, maybe even having the water maybe might have prevented the heat injury. Don't know.
Right.
But what about, starting out beginners, in this jogging class, I'm sure there were all levels of fitness. Beginners who've never jogged, and then you got marathon runners. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you have this huge range of individuals that might be taking a jogging class at the university. Well, you need to do some kinds of assessments and evaluation of these students first. And maybe those that haven't been active, you start them on a very, like a walking program, and, walking early in the morning or late in the evening, if it's really hot during the day. I mean, there's several precautions that you can take as an instructor to help minimize injuries, but the instructor needs to know those. They need to know what those precautions are. And that's why the education and the training is so important, because if they haven't had that formal education and training, maybe they don't know. They don't know what those, precautions are. So let me just give you another quick example for a case where I was an expert witness in. And this was a beginner, a novice. The client was a beginner novice. And the trainer, on the very first day of training, actually had this individual do a very intense, strenuous leg workout. No other muscle groups, just the legs. Okay, a lot of squats and those type of exercises. So the next day, the client contacts the trainer and says, I have severe pain in my legs, not muscle soreness, severe pain, and my urine is dark. Now,
rhabdo, right?
Right. And so, a well-educated and trained trainer, okay, would know, all right, this is a serious condition. and would have, highly recommend to his client, seek medical attention immediately. But what did this trainer tell him? This trainer said, put ice on it.
Oh.
So, this kind of goes back to what I'm trying to stress here is that importance of the basic knowledge and skills. How, first of all, why did he have this client, a novice, do a heavy workout with the legs only on the first day? So that tells you something that maybe he really didn't have adequate knowledge and skills. And in a way, and he was diagnosed with exertional rhabdomyolysis. And so he sued the trainer in the club, and it was settled out of court. And I don't even know what the amount was on that. That was not disclosed. But, this could have been easily prevented. This shouldn't have happened. And, unfortunately, the trainer in the club had to go through all of the processes of the negligence lawsuit and everything. And so, and then they lost the case. I mean, it was not lost, but they settled out of court, so.
Lost the case. I mean, that's another way.
Eventually, effectively, it's like they're still paying out all the damages
right.
the insurance provider is. But, and what was kind of interesting in this case, because, we always want to make sure that our trainers and instructors are not diagnosing any kind of medical conditions or treating any kind of medical conditions, to always stay within their professional scope of practice. And in a way, in a sense, this trainer, by not really even acknowledging the signs and symptoms of being something serious and just kind of brushing it off and saying, put ice on it, he was kind of, in a way, making a diagnosis and a treatment, kind of, not technically a medical diagnosis, but, that he didn't know, that he really should have referred that client to his physician. So, it's really, I guess, important for managers and owners to, really think about the education, the importance of formal education and practical training, of their staff members, their trainers and instructors. And
yeah, it sounds like they should, honestly, as an owner, just do like what you were saying, a practical test out of the trainer. Yes. Give them, throw out, okay, I'm going to have you train me, and almost like a role play. Oh no, I hurt my shoulder. What do I do? Just me, I'm a Pilates instructor. And when I have had to work for any studio, they make me train someone in front of a master trainer to watch, to see where my skill level is, everything else. So that would be, it seems like if you were a good facility and managed well, you would do that for every instructor that came through the door.
Well, every customer, you buy PT a 20-pack, everybody, before you start your PT, first session is assessment. So let's see where this customer is at. Even for an orientation, if you do 2 free orientations with your gym membership, and this is to new gym owners or old gym owners, if you don't do that, what they're basically saying, to avoid this, is do an assessment with that person that just what the PT package, or am I correct with saying that, Dr. Jess?
Yeah, I agree 100%. You both make very good points. And I actually would recommend, like in the interview process, before you even officially hire somebody, you would test their knowledge and skills, in the interview. You would have situational questions, like what would you do if this happened? How they would respond and how they're thinking through, situations. And then I would even have them teach a mock class. I would like to see their teaching skills and training skills. And then, like you said, is to, make sure that then after they're hired, that you do maybe a more formal assessment of their skills and have them work under a master instructor, and that master instructor also can be very helpful in assessing, the skills, of the new employee. And especially, I think, during that probationary period, ever if it's 2, 3, 4 months, whatever it is, you really want to have very close supervision and evaluate that new employee periodically, a performance appraisal of their job, and really get them started on the right track. And, because that'll save you maybe a $14 million lawsuit down the road, and it'd be a lot less expensive to spend some time up front with some formal education and training. A lot less expensive.
Do you know the level of certification that what that trainer was that you were the expert witness to?
Yeah, it was a personal trainer certification. I don't remember which one, and I probably, even if I did, I wouldn't say it publicly. I don't want to. Now in our textbook, of course, if the court did indicate the credentials of the defendant, then we did. We just, described what the court described in terms of the degree that they had and certifications that they had or whatever. So it's in the book, but, I think, the thing is with, certifications, I think they do really vary in how in-depth that knowledge assessment is on a written exam. And remember, there's only a written exam. There's no practical exams. Back in the day, when I was first getting certifications, I think I maybe mentioned this last time, I can't remember, but I had to first pass the written exam, and then I had to pass a practical exam. And so I worked weeks and weeks to practice those skills just so I could be sure to pass the practical exam. So I felt pretty, confident, and competent because I had to spend a lot of time practicing those skills before that practical exam. And of course, nowadays, there are, with personal training certifications and group exercise certifications, you don't see those practical exams being required anymore. It's just the written exam. And so, it's just something that managers and owners need to kind of think about. And,
where I was going with that was a lot of new gym owners, or even some owners that maybe never have done PT before. They're thinking to themselves, okay, I want to increase my revenue at the end of the month. Let's hire some trainers, and they don't know about the certifications. And there's some certifications that, you have Judy that just lost 50 pounds and goes, I'm going to help others, and goes online and takes, I'm not going to say the name of the test, but there are tests out there that you can get like that. And just because, yes, you did a good job on yourself, but this person over here, her body doesn't react, or his body doesn't react the same way yours does. You can cause some serious damage. I personally would say those low-level certs, although they're certs, I would start them off and have them trained under, have them be like probationary trainers and make them train under the other trainers. And if you, move on for 3 months and still you're doing the most basic, like orientations is what I mean. And then and have them graduate till you get a NASM and like the certification that you recommended, where I think that right there will cut out almost like a lot of the lawsuits that are going on at the gyms, because those accredited certs that you're recommending, they cover almost everything. No?
Yeah, I think a lot of them that are accredited, are probably pretty good. But even if you had, even if you looked at like the content that's covered in those certification exams, it could really vary in terms of the depth, of knowledge that's being assessed, even though the exam is accredited. A friend of mine, who's also an expert witness, he took like 30 certification exams. Most of them were accredited. And he definitely made that comment that, they really vary in terms of the depth, even though they're accredited. Some might only get at some really basic kind of knowledge, but others get into some more in-depth knowledge, So that's another thing to kind of think about. But I think, for gym owners, definitely require the accredited certification, but then you still have, responsibility to make sure that that person has the knowledge and skills to perform the job properly. And that would probably require some additional education and training and assessment of their skills. Like, Anthony, you brought up assessment, assessing the client. Well, I passed a written exam. I know how to do an assessment. Really? But where did you demonstrate your assessment skills? For example, like even doing a simple skin fold test or a sub-max bike test. I mean, some really basic assessments. Does that person know how to do those assessments? Because, I mean, how do you know that from just passing a written exam? You don't know it until you actually observe it and evaluate it yourself and check out their skills.
I will say it makes like a huge difference. And for Pilates, what they do is they make you do 600 hours of your own observation, then you're doing it, and then you're doing also you're teaching it as an assistant, and then you do a practical test out and a written exam for 4 hours. They both are. And so they have you go through this whole comprehensive training. And then for me, I was so grateful. I worked for a studio that knew better. She knew that we need to have apprentice instructors, and she made us stay under an apprenticeship for 6 months before we could actually be a trainer.
Yeah.
And we were in a post-rehab facility. So everything that I saw, like you said, I wouldn't have known how to treat a stroke victim if I hadn't experienced it firsthand. So, or I wouldn't have known how to treat someone with spondylolisthesis or stenosis of the spine unless I saw it. And so she would have us go with people who had neuroma, whatever condition. It was a post-rehab facility. Rehab could do no more. They would come. And then as an apprentice, I would watch the master trainer with these bodies, and I would get to see firsthand, oh, that's how you modify. Oh, that's what you do. This person can't do extension. And I'll tell you, it was invaluable. And she still, to this day, has written books on Pilates and globally trained this certification. And so I was so grateful that I had that type of training. And I wish more gyms, studios would take the lead in that way, because you're going to produce a quality instructor and you're never going to have to deal with the lawsuit at that point. Why wouldn't you know, take the extra step?
Money.
Yeah.
Well, most gyms can't pay.
It does come down to the money, making the investment up front. And how do we convince, managers and owners how important that is, that investment up front. I think that was excellent what you went through, especially when you're working with individuals with all types of medical conditions and the precautions that you need to take given that medical condition. And so, we're seeing a lot of, trainers and instructors, working with people that have all types of medical conditions. And that's even advanced knowledge. So it's not even your basic knowledge to work maybe with an apparently healthy adult, but now you're working with people with chronic illnesses and various kinds of diseases and so on. And what are those the additional knowledge and skills that you need to understand what those precautions might be? And we have some cases, in the text, where the trainer or the instructor did not have the knowledge that was necessary and did not take the proper precautions, given the medical history of the individual. So, I would highly recommend, I guess, for the trainers and instructors out there, that they go and obtain the exercises medicine credential through the American College of Sports Medicine. That would be a really good start to start gaining some knowledge and skill in the area of, various medical conditions and precautions you need to take and so on. And so you can just, search exercises medicine and, that whole effort between ACSM and the American Medical Association has been around for a long time. But ACSM just recently revised their exercises medicine credential. And so I would recommend at least starting with that. And because you also, if trainers and instructors are wanting to receive referrals from physicians or other healthcare providers, you want to make sure you have that credibility as an exercise professional. And that credibility starts with getting those credentials and that practical experience, like you had with, working with various individuals with all types of medical conditions. And that practical experience is, I think, also extremely valuable. And you learn so much from it, especially when you have a master trainer like you did, Natalia. I mean, that's just amazing what you went through.
It was awesome. I was so thankful for it. So like treating a healthy body after that is a piece of cake. You're like, oh, wow, I don't have to do this and this. Oh, you can do everything. This is awesome. So it makes it really easy. But you're always more cautious because you see that, what it could lead to if you're not tending to just the proper procedures and just making sure that you do modify. And, I wish it would be awesome because I got the NASM training certification. And like what you said, I was so thankful for my Pilates training because once I became NASM, it was just written. There was no practical test out for me. So the textbook's this big, but the exam was 100 questions. And if I didn't have the Pilates training that I did and background, and then I became a trainer just doing NASM, I would be leery because I didn't get, even though it's a great certification, I didn't have any firsthand training experience besides Pilates, which was huge, right? It made me that much a better trainer. But if I had just done NASM, I would ask someone, well, how long have you been training for? Like you said, it's just a written, how are we supposed to trust that this person's going to know how to handle my body and what I'm dealing with? So it's education, hands down, has to be, to me, and practical education. What you're saying has to be probably one of the best preventions for a lawsuit for these.
I would agree. I think out of, all of the, negligence lawsuits that I have reviewed over the years, probably the biggest issue is with improper instruction, and improper, design and delivery of an exercise program. Now, there are lawsuits for not maintaining your exercise equipment properly and providing emergency care properly and those kinds of things. But probably out of, all the negligence lawsuits, it's usually an injury due to some type of improper instruction or supervision, given the individual's health and fitness, status and so on. So to me, it's really worth that investment up front, as a way to really help protect yourself, and you don't want your clients and participants to be injured. I mean, you want to have, a safe environment. Sometimes when people have an injury, they're fearful of coming back. And that's not what we're after here. We want people to exercise for a lifetime, don't we? And we want to make sure they stay healthy and prevent injuries so they can continue to exercise, throughout their lifetime and not have that fear of a re-injury. So, there's, all kinds of reasons. And I think the quality, when we think of instructors and trainers who provide high quality instruction and supervision, in my opinion, that helps you to obtain more members, more clients, because you have a reputation of providing a high quality service. And I think that's, to me, one of the best ways to make money. Okay, if you're really into making money and that's what you want to do, and I don't have any problem with people making money, make all the money you want, but never compromise the safety of your participants. And, invest some money and time up front to really have well-prepared instructors and trainers and staff members, and provide that, and, that they will come. Your reputation will be, will be rewarded.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What would you say about, because I could bring up something that I guarantee you probably 80% of gym owners are doing that, or probably can get them in trouble, is trainers that just have training certs that are writing prescription, like writing diets to people that can maybe, get them like severe caloric,
deficits.
Deficits. Well, are trainers even supposed to? If you just have a training certificate, can you get in trouble if you're giving diets to people?
I'm so glad you brought that up, Anthony. You can be in trouble if you are practicing dietetics without a license. Okay. So when we think of scope of practice, we've already talked about scope of practice, from a negligence perspective, from a civil claim, improper instruction, and improper training that can lead to, a lawsuit and not practicing within your scope. So, for example, professional scope of practice really deals with, staying within your education and training and certification experience and so on. And so, for example, like if a trainer has a client with a particular medical condition, I think last time we talked about the woman who had osteoporosis and the trainer had her do the jumping reps, on a bozo ball, and she fell and fractured her wrist. Well, that trainer probably should have referred that client to an exercise professional that knew the precautions regarding, somebody with osteoporosis. And so you want to always stay within your scope of practice, what I call the professional scope of practice. And so that would be an example of that. The other would be what I call the legal scope of practice, which I think you're getting at, Anthony, and that's practicing like dietetics or practicing any licensed profession without license. But probably the most common area would be the practicing dietetics without a license with, people that work in our field, and they're, providing, meal plans and nutrition plans and recommending supplements, and they're doing all these kinds of things. And that can get them into trouble. And now we're talking about, the violation of a state statute, a licensing statute. So it's a criminal case, not a civil case. And so let me just give you an example of a recent case in Florida. And this is kind of, I really like this case because it has some nice twists and turns to it. But anyway, this was a fitness and wellness professional who was providing nutritional assessments and individual nutritional counseling. And it was here in Florida, where I am. And originally she was doing this in California before she moved to Florida. California does not have a licensing requirement, okay? And so she was able to do what she was doing in California. She was not violating any kind of nutrition or dietetics practice act because California doesn't have one. But Florida does, okay? And so what happens in this case as well as other cases, probably a licensed dietitian found out about what she was doing, and she was doing most of her assessments and advice online, okay? And so this dietitian, it's probably a dietitian that found out about it and reported it to the state board. The state board that has oversight of licensure, okay? So then the state board can investigate the situation and find out what's going on, which the state board did. And so in Florida, there is a statute called the unlicensed practice of a healthcare profession. And so if anybody is violating, a licensing statute, whether that's medicine or dietetics or nursing or athletic training, whatever it might be, you can be faced with, a cease and desist order, which basically says you have to stop what you're doing and they might fine you like $500. Or it might be a misdemeanor or even a felony, different levels of felony. So that's all specified in the statute for violating, a statute that requires licensure, to perform a certain type of job. So anyway, in this case, the state board did fine her the $500 and asked her to stop doing, what she was doing. And of course, she did not like that. Okay. And so she files a lawsuit. And in this lawsuit, she claims that her free speech rights are being violated. Her First Amendment, constitutional amendment, First Amendment speech, freedom of speech rights were being violated. So now this becomes a federal case, okay? So it goes to the Florida, federal district court, trial court. And the court basically says, no, the Practicing Act in Florida does not, there's nothing in there, and you in terms of violating your speech rights, it doesn't have anything to do with that. There's no violation of your speech rights, basically, okay? All right, well then, so that decision is made. She's not happy with that decision. So anytime, you're not happy with the trial court's decision, either party can appeal to a higher court. Yeah. So she goes to the 11th Circuit Appellate Court, okay, and a distinguished, group of appellate court justices. And so they hear the case and they hear the oral arguments, on both sides of the case. And so as we are waiting for them to make a decision, whether or not her free speech rights were being violated or not, a very interesting twist here. Florida amends its Nutrition and Dietetics Practice Act, basically saying that individuals can provide nutrition, individual nutrition advice, and information, counseling, whatever, in the area of nutrition, and you can make money doing that. There's no problems. Recommend supplements. I mean, all kinds of, you can do quite a few things. However, there were two caveats to this amendment to this Practice Act. One was that she could no longer service clients who were under the supervision of a physician regarding nutrition, medical, therapy. Okay, like for a medical condition, and there was nutrition intervention to help treat her medical condition. So she could no longer service those type of clients. And the other caveat was that she could not represent herself and use titles like dietitian and nutritionist and so on. There's a whole list of titles that she could not use. So you would think, okay, after this amendment came out, the state board came back and said, okay, this is kind of a moot point. She can go ahead and continue doing what she's doing as long as she doesn't violate the requirements within this amendment.
Right.
She's not happy with that. Okay. And so anyway, she still thinks her free speech rights are being violated.
Oh my God.
She just got licensed with all this trouble that she's gone through.
Exactly. By this time, okay. Interesting. This case started in 2017, and it did not end until December of 2022.
Wow.
So what is it, 5 or 6 years or whatever?
Wow.
So anyway, make a real quick end of the story is the appellate court did tell her that that her free speech rights were not violated, and that she needed to follow the requirements within the amendment. So then she files a petition with the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay, so she wants now the U.S. Supreme Court to hear her case and to rule on her case. And now the U.S. Supreme Court gets thousands of these petitions every year, and the Supreme Court decides which ones they're going to hear and rule on. And of course, they denied the petition in her case. And so when that happens, the ruling of the lower court stands, until maybe something else changes down the road. But, anyway, a long story there, a case that had some interesting twists and turns to it. But, for individuals that I guess are looking at, what can I do regarding nutrition assessments and nutrition counseling and so on, you really need to review your state laws, the licensing laws within your state. And people can go to the Commission on Dietetics Registration, CDR, the Commission on Dietetics Registration. And on that website, you can click on every state and review, what those statutes are regarding the practice of dietetics and nutrition and so on. So you want to make sure that you're not violating, any state statutes regarding the practice of, dietetics or providing nutrition advice and that kind of thing. So the other thing that I would recommend for your viewers, a couple of colleagues of mine that are PhDs and RDNs, registered dietitian nutritionists, we wrote an article, and I think the title of it was something like Drawing a Line, Understanding the Scope of Practice Between Registered Dietitians and Exercise Professionals. And that was published back in January of 2017. And it's free access now on the ACSM website. So anybody can, download it and print it, save it, whatever. And it would be a really good article for gym owners and managers to review with their staff members. Even though it's an old article, a lot of the information is still very relevant, and getting a better understanding. What's the role of the dietitian and what's the role of the exercise professional? Because the exercise professional can really do a lot, as long as they don't cross over into that practice of dietetics. So we can provide all types of nutrition education. Of course we can. A lot of our professionals have certifications in nutrition and maybe have coursework in nutrition, and they know a lot about nutrition, And so there's a lot of education that we can provide and still stay within our scope of practice as an exercise professional. And so, but you just need to know, where where you need to draw that line.
Can you give a quick example of like what would be okay and what would not be okay? What you're saying, like you can still give nutrition information, but what would be crossing the line?
Well, crossing the line would be getting into doing individual nutrition assessments, okay, and providing individual nutrition counseling. Those are the two biggies, the assessments, individual, okay, talking about individual advice, individual assessments. So that's really, where the scope of practice of a dietitian comes in. The dietitian is the one who does the nutritional assessments and then prescribes, a nutrition program and provides individual, counseling. And the dietitians have in their training a lot of background about medical conditions that individuals have and medications that they might be on, and all kinds of knowledge that they have. So when they are, providing individual counseling, they take into consideration, that individual's health history, medical history, and so on, medications they're on. And so a lot of times, an exercise professional, if somebody's on some type of medication, do they really know? You have to be kind of careful, because if you're recommending some kind of supplements and that kind of thing, can there be a interference with the supplement and the medication? I don't know. Sure. And I guess if somebody was a client and they asked me, well, what do you think about this supplement or that supplement or whatever? Because I'm sure that's a question that comes up a lot, and they think their trainer is the expert in everything, right? So, and they want their trainer's advice on supplements. And if I was a trainer, I would say, well, here are a couple of websites that are very, very good government websites that provide a lot of information about all types of nutritional supplements. So if you have questions about a particular supplement, go to one of those sites and learn a lot about it yourself, and then discuss that with your physician or maybe your dietitian if you have one, and then go from there. But as a trainer, I would probably stay away from recommending supplements. And I know a lot of clubs have gone away, have policies now where they do not allow their trainers to recommend supplements. And it used to be where they would sell them. And
you got sub sales. Like some trainers would get dinged if their sub sales weren't high. Front desk people would get dinged if they didn't push their sub sales.
Really?
Yeah. So that's crazy.
I won't name the club, but I worked for a club that would do that same thing, Anthony. Yep. And they would tell me, oh, this month we want to push this fish oil, or this month we want to push detox. So I'd get done and they would say, oh, we want you to recommend after a session. So I felt like kind of slimy, like, oh, by the way, you're going to need to try our raspberry flavored fish oil if you want to feel great in your joints. And I didn't sign up to be a trainer to give people supplements. I signed up to help them physically. So it was like, I just stopped doing it. I said, I don't care if I get commission on this. I don't really care. I'm not going to recommend this for somebody who I don't even know if they need it or not. It was crazy, but they would tell us, like, recommend this one for the month.
Yeah, they push sub sales.
Give us education on it. But for me to prescribe that to someone, like you said, an individual prescription, and I don't know if they're taking a medication that is contraindicated with fish oil, for all I know, right? Why would I sell that to them? So yeah, it was a thing, and I'm thankful if that you're saying they're starting to move away from that, because I thought it was kind of ridiculous personally.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of clubs have gone away with it. There's probably, like I said, probably still some out there that are, have those kind of things going on with, the incentives for their staff to, market and sell the supplements. But, some clubs and fitness facilities also have, hired a registered dietitian, and, where individuals who have a lot of nutrition questions and concerns, they can set up a consultation with the dietitian, and then also working with, that individual's medical provider and so on, which dietitians do all the time, to make sure that, whatever is being recommended, is kind of a team approach, in the area of nutrition. So, yeah, I think that, there's some ways around that, by being able to, and that would be a really good, we recommend actually in this article that I just mentioned, Drawing a Line, we recommend, like in a staff training session or a staff meeting, to do some role modeling. You know, like, okay, one person plays the client, the other person plays the trainer, and the client is asking all types of nutrition questions, and how is that trainer answering them? And those answers reflect your policy. So you would have a policy regarding nutrition education and nutrition information that all of your staff members would follow. But you got to train them on that policy and test them, like through role playing, to see if they really know how to comply with the policy. I mean, that's just a kind of a quick little simple way to kind of assess, because you don't want, your trainers, making recommendations that could be harmful potentially.
Yeah.
Speaking of being harmful, I know like every year there's a new fad type of workout. Back in 2007, 2008, there was the kettlebell gyms where it was a kettlebell workout. Now, CrossFit has stayed with us, but you're starting to see like the HIIT types of programs and gyms that are directed to HIIT, and that's super high intensity. I'm sure like you have somebody that's never walked in a gym before thinking, oh, I need to join up to a gym, and I'm signing up to a HIIT gym. What are some ways that, like, precautions that these types of clubs, or if you're just a gym that has HIIT classes in it, what are some precautions that you should take for something like that, if you know of any?
Actually, sorry, before you answer, Dr. Jess, I have to run because I have an appointment. Actually,
Okay.
You guys
I'll take it from here.
Finish it up.
Yeah.
I'm going to exit out, but Dr.
Okay.
Jess.
All right. Well,
thank
thanks
you,
so much.
Dr. Jess.
Thanks for
seeing you. And we'll have you back again because we still have so much more we can talk about.
Yeah. Well, thanks again so much. Appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
Bye, Natalia.
All right. See ya.
All right. Have fun.
All right. I will. Bye.
All right. Now you're all to myself. So real quick, so you know what I'm talking about. Like, you're starting to see these other types of clubs sprouting up all over. And the problem is you have someone like my mother, for example, that's just like, oh, it's a gym, going in there. And then there's these super strenuous workouts, HIIT type workouts. And some clubs are adopting them into their class schedule. I'm sure it opens themselves up. Is there any precautions that you see that they can take for those types of gyms or workout programs?
Yeah, it's also a very good question. First, just kind of making a distinction between what I call HIIT, high intensity training, and high intensity interval training. And there's a difference really between the two. And of course, several years ago, these HIIT programs, these high intensity training programs, and he actually referred to extreme conditioning programs, ECPs. And they were, causing quite a few problems like exertional rhabdomyolysis and all types of injuries. And so what we have seen over the last several years is more going to the high intensity interval training programs. And so those are becoming more and more popular. And of course, generally speaking, I think they're a lot safer than, a HIIT program where you're doing high intensity nonstop for 30, 40 minutes or whatever. So you have rest interval in between your high intensity exercise, and then you have an active recovery interval. Then you go back to high intensity and another recovery interval, and so your body can recover from that high intensity, getting the heart rate back down, and so on. So anyway, however, there are still precautions that you want to take for the high intensity interval training. So let's take, for example, body weight exercises or weight training exercises at high intensity. For example, like burpees. Burpees are kind of considered, a high intensity body workout, just using your body. And, can a beginner do a whole bunch of burpees in a high intensity interval on day one? Probably not. Okay. I might not even be able to do one. Okay. Because they haven't really developed yet the strength, the coordination, the balance, whatever, even to perform, a high intensity activity, kind of like a barbell exercise, Barbell exercises are usually considered, more intermediate advanced exercises. And And so you need to remember that people need to progress and start out, at a kind of low, moderate levels of exercise before getting into maybe a high intensity interval training. So you would want to make sure, like for body weight and resistance exercises, that they have actually developed the skills, the muscle strength, the balance, coordination, etc., and perform the exercise, correctly. Position, execution of the exercise is really important, because anytime you compromise that execution of the exercise, it increases the risk of injury. And so, want to make sure that they've attained, the skill level to even perform the high level intensity exercise. And like with cardio, high intensity, you want to make sure that they have at least obtained a moderate to vigorous level of cardiovascular capacity or aerobic capacity before putting them into a high intensity interval training, where they're working at like almost toward max heart rate. And then a recovery. Well, are they ready for that real high intensity, almost max heart rate, exercise? And they're probably not until they've actually, progressed to at least a moderate to vigorous level. And so those are some of the main precautions, and a lot of times I get the question, well, how long should that high intensity interval be? And how long is the recovery interval? And that really also depends on the individual. So like if you are teaching a class, you mentioned like classes, high intensity interval training classes, the intensity level of the individual should be based on the individual. And even the recovery period the recovery interval would be based on the individual. So you don't want everybody doing the same thing, because they might all be at a little bit different levels of fitness and health status and so on. So it really comes down to the instructor being able to individualize, the program in terms of that intensity interval and the recovery interval.
Sure. So that goes to show you, if you're a gym out there and you're like, oh, I'm just going to make high intensity classes, you can't just, it's not a one size fits all. Like which we're saying here is have a beginner and an advanced class, and don't just have one, is what I'm gathering, right?
Yeah, I highly recommend beginner classes for any type of group exercise. No matter what it is, I think those beginner classes are, very valuable, and I think your participants would really appreciate it too. And I think it's a good way to, establish rapport, with your new, participants and new members that are beginners, and it's definitely the safest way to go is to have a beginner class taught by a really, well-educated and trained professional.
Sure. Plus, it's setting them up for failure. I mean, nobody wants to go into a class where they just get annihilated, right? I mean, it does two things. Yeah. All the beginners that are in there are either just joined or there's somebody that's just starting. So it's a place to make friends. Everyone's a beginner. Nobody's feeling left out. We're all kind of beginning with this journey. And like I said, you're not getting annihilated to where if you finish the class, you're like, I'm never going back there ever again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you don't want that to happen. You want people to feel good after their workout. Like they've had a good workout and it felt good. And maybe they might have a little bit of muscle soreness the next day or two. But as long as that is not, severe muscle soreness, that's the, another thing that maybe they did too much too soon. If their muscles, like if they can't even get out of bed or walk up a flight of steps or something, they have extreme muscle soreness, it's probably a sign that maybe they did too much too soon. And, but, progression is really key from a safety perspective. And so, and I think the HIIT programs, I'm going to share with you just real quick.
Sure.
This was the ACSM Health and Fitness Journal. They did a special issue on HIIT and chronic disease. And so these were exercise professionals who were leading, HIIT programs for people with all types of medical conditions and having a great deal of success, with these individuals that were in the program. But all the articles in here also talk about the precautions, that you need to take. Given the individual's medical condition and so on. So anyway, this is and all of the articles in this issue now are free access on the ACSM website. So And there's some good articles. I mean, just even from a general perspective, not even if you're working with people with medical conditions, but some really good advice, even if you're just working with the general population, apparently healthy individuals, some things that you can learn from these articles about setting up a really good HIIT program, for your club or your.
That's interesting. Does it have anything in there about the, I know rock steady is just a thing I always keep hearing with people with Parkinson's. They're like heavily into boxing, and it's supposed to be bringing up their thing. So is there any other illnesses that stand out from something like that you know of, that there's a specific exercise that helps?
Well, I know I'm familiar with the Rock Steady boxing program, and I've done some consulting work from them and some presentations for them over the years. And, I think it's a great program, and they've got a good training program for their trainers and so on. And so, it's one type of exercise that has been shown to be very beneficial for people with Parkinson's. Yeah. And, in terms of the balance and coordination, and because, the biggest concern a lot of times with Parkinson's are people that, the risk of falls, and if we can develop muscle strength and balance and coordination, that can be very helpful
Sure.
in helping them to prevent falls. But I can tell you for, almost any medical condition that is out there now, there are a lot of resources that you can obtain that can go over a lot of these different precautions, related to exercise programs and what type of exercise might be best, given the medical condition. And like this journal that I mentioned, we have covered, I'm very involved in this journal. I've been on the editorial board for a long time, but they have all kinds of articles on medical conditions for exercise professionals. It's really written for the practitioner. Okay. Sure. And that's what I think is it's not a research journal. Okay. Now,
gotcha.
ACSM has all kinds of research journals. But this one is really geared for fitness managers and exercise professionals. And you can go back and, once the article is published, a year after the article is published, they are all free on the ACSM website, free access. So
I'll link them in the description.
What? I'm sorry.
I'll link them in the description of the video.
Okay. Yeah, and it's it's just a really good resource. And like I said, they've covered probably every medical condition that you can think of. Okay, and come up with some really good suggestions on the type of exercise and precautions that need to be taken. So it's it's one source of many. There's many sources out there. There's a lot of textbooks on clinical exercise physiology and so on. But, I like this journal because the articles I think are really, easy to read and relevant, and, they can be used in staff training programs, staff meetings, for discussion purposes. And so I think it's a really valuable resource. It's been around now for 27 years. So it's doing very well.
Keeping everyone safe, which brings to my next question for you. What will be some strategies that to creating like a safety culture in the gym?
Yeah, that's also, I think, a very good question. And I think, one of the first things is obviously you want to be aware of what your potential legal duties are. And we talked a little bit about that today. And making sure that you are developing risk management strategies, to follow those potential legal duties, and having a good comprehensive risk management plan. But also, I think, in terms of creating that safety culture, having all your new members and participants go through a facility orientation. Okay. Because I think it's important for us to inform them of their responsibilities, their safety responsibilities. And if we don't inform them of those, how do we know if they won't know them? Okay, so I always recommend that facilities have their safety policies posted, maybe a sign, that has all the safety policies posted in the facility or in the membership contract or on the website or whatever, to get that information out. But definitely in an orientation, you can go through those safety policies and explain why we have safety policies. It's for your safety and the safety of others. And we do everything we can here to always focus on your safety. It's a top priority of our facility. And so I think that the orientation, I think always having safety topics on your agenda for your regular staff meetings. That safety is always discussed at every staff meeting. So your staff members are always thinking about safety and maybe discussing an article regarding safety or exercise prescription or whatever it might be. And, keeping that in front of them all the time about, we have a safety culture here and you have a responsibility to help us carry out that safety culture. And we want to help you do that. Okay? We give you that information to help you be successful. And so those are some of the things that you can do, in terms of creating a safety culture. I think also one of the, I write the fitness safety column for the ACSM Health and Fitness Journal. And in one of my columns I had published, it's actually in our textbook too, was called a safety culture survey or a safety culture audit. And you have your employees, complete this safety culture anonymously, okay? And then getting their perspective on what they believe, are some of these safety issues within the facility. There, as a manager, you might not know some of these things, but maybe your employees know some of these things. And then, you tally up the results, the aggregate results, and you bring in the data from the survey into a staff meeting and say, hey, we did this safety assessment or a safety survey, and this is what we found. Maybe here are some things that we need to work on as a staff in terms of enhancing the safety. And that might be a really good place to start, and then maybe working together as a team to work on improvements in safety within the facility. Okay. For example, maybe one of the staff members says, I always see these dumbbells on the floor all the time. Nobody's ever putting them back on the rack, and we know there's a lot of trip and falls with equipment laying around, in the facility. Well, so what can we do as a staff members to, address that safety concern? Okay. And, maybe as a group, we can come up with, some strategies that would be effective. I just give that as a quick example. And, but getting the staff members involved so they get that buy-in, that we're all in this together. We all want to create this safety culture, for our members. And that, we all are, buy into the concept and we agree, and management is there to support us and takes the lead, in creating that safety culture.
Return your weights to the dumbbell rack. Now they have an excuse to even yell at people. That was my biggest pet peeve when I see trainers like just taking weights and a whole bunch of weights and then just leaving them and then moving on to something else and leaving the weights. Like, what? But yeah, that would be right. But also, gym owners, if you're listening, taking serious when members are reporting issues with equipment. Like if someone's saying the treadmill is slipping, I was put it at 8.0 and my foot slipped because the treadmill the wax needs to be replaced. You see metal fraying on stuff, taking reports seriously on downed equipment or equipment that is going down, don't just wait for it to break, right?
Right. Absolutely. We have in our textbook what we call an incident report form. So anytime a member or a staff member, sees something, okay, bring it to the attention to the front desk, and the front desk should have an incident report form where, whatever the problem is, it's actually documented and it's given to management right away. And then, hopefully management gets on it right away to inspect the situation and decide whether or not is this an important thing to deal with or whatever. So I think the documentation is really important when it comes to things, the risks that you see, in a facility. And actually, there's a legal duty. It's another legal duty to inspect your facility for dangers or risks, and to do those inspections probably periodically, and to document that you have conducted those inspections. And then if you have found a danger or risk, you either need to remove it, okay, or you need to warn, have a warning sign of some type until you can get it fixed or repaired or whatever's needed. And so that's really important. There's been several cases where, fitness facilities, gyms have not carried out their legal duty to invitees, business invitees, and all your participant members are invitees. And so you have a basic duty to, inspect your facility and equipment. And then if you see a danger, make sure you correct it or warn.
Sure.
That's a legal duty. And it's based on state law, but that's kind of the general, duties regarding the equipment.
And if you're a gym owner listening to this, nobody's like talking down to you. This whole podcast is just so you can protect yourself so you don't get into a lawsuit. So if you're listening to this and you don't have a fire extinguisher, a wet floor sign, yellow tape, defibrillator, you need to stop, because those are just the basics that I can name off the top of my head that can get you in some serious trouble if you don't have at your gym, no?
Yes, I agree. Those are basics. Yeah. And, and even OSHA, this is another area of law. OSHA has several requirements as well that you need to meet. And you want to make sure you're meeting, they have signage requirements. And they have all noise requirements. They have all kinds of standards and requirements. And so, that's just another area of law, and that you want to be familiar with. So I can't emphasize enough, the importance of obtaining, the legal education and becoming informed, about the law and, how to comply with the law and how important that is. Because I think once you have that education, you're going to feel a lot more confident about what you're doing and not worry about things so much. What can go wrong? A lot of things can go wrong. But, I think if you really are well educated about the law and how it applies to the fitness industry, then you just come across being a lot more confident and not worried as much, about your business. And because you want to protect your business and you want to protect yourself.
Yeah. I wish so many more people would do that. Like it seems like a lot just focus on that waiver and that's all. They think this is going to be some magic waiver that's going to absolve them from everything. When before we hit record on this, we were just talking about a case from a corporate gym, one of the bigger gyms out there, that got sued for not having water in a jacuzzi. And who knows if there was no yellow tape, there was no wet floor sign, nothing. And they were sued, and the person was awarded $1.3 million for falling into an empty jacuzzi, where who knows what happened if there was a wet floor sign, yellow tape might have been thrown out.
Yeah, it very well could have been, because it would have been a warning to that individual, and then he would have not have fallen in. Okay,
right?
He would have heeded to the warning, the yellow tape or the signage or whatever, and then the injury wouldn't have happened. And so, there's a lot of things that we can do, to prevent injuries that are fairly basic kinds of things. And of course, there are other areas, legal liability exposures, that take a little bit more time and effort, like the training of your staff and education of your staff. That'll take, some time and effort to do it right.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Jess, I took so much of your time that Natalia has left. So thank you for staying extra time with me. We appreciate it that you've taught me more this time again, and I hope to have you back on for a future episode again to learn even more.
Okay. All right, Anthony. Well, it's been my pleasure. Thanks a lot for the opportunity, and I hope the information's been helpful for your viewers. Maybe a few tips along the way that they might be thinking about. So that's the main thing.
Well, thank you so much again, and we look forward to you coming back on the show.
All right. Sounds great, Anthony. You take care. Thanks again.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.